Hi, everyone. This is, as you know, part of our values series. And today, Sarah is going to actually be the one who's going to be speaking to us and ministering the word to us. And I'm looking forward to that. This week, we're looking at excellence is our spirit. And this has been quite a journey for us as a couple. I know it's something that we value and significantly for us as a body at All Nations Church. But for us as a couple, it's been a long sort of 18-year journey of being married and finding the right balance here. Because we kind of come at it, at this sort of stuff, as we do many things, from completely opposite sides. And as Sarah will explain, we believe that excellence is wonderful. We believe it's godly. We believe it's a hallmark for us as a church. But it's so important. But for me, I kind of fall, we talk about two different ditches. I kind of fall on one ditch, which is the that'll do mentality. So it's kind of the opposite of excellence. It's like the let's get this done most of the way and then not bother to finish it. And
I would fall in the other ditch of perfectionism and, it being exact. And so this is all to preface and contextualize what I'm going to share about. So there are both sides of it. You will probably find yourself in one side or the other. And so that's why we're talking about excellence.
Yeah, and one side kind of comes from permissivism perspective, and one's more of a legalism perspective. And we're going to kind of hopefully, through the course of the rest of this morning, Sarah's going to strip away those things, and we'll see why none of those are excellence. And for some reason, the idea of, you know how you have Mike Holmes, who's like, do it right. My mentality of just get it done apparently isn't kingdom. And I've learned that, and I'm learning that. And Sarah is one of the best people.
Wait, you say my way is the...
Oh, I say there's three ways of doing things: the right way, the wrong way, and my way. And my way is like the wrong way, but faster. That's kind of my motto. Which Sarah loves in practice.
And let's just do it right the first time.
So Sarah has been by far the most helpful person to me in seeing this and in understanding this, and I think she's an exemplary person for us as a body to be, when I'm a little bit biased. But to be able to help us to be able to understand, have a revelation of what excellence is and why it's so dear to the heart of God and why excellence is our spirit.
Welcome everybody to Church Online. This week we are talking about excellence and how excellence is our spirit. We always bring our best with no half measures, our hearts set on things done well for a purpose. I'm not sure how I drew this value. No pressure. This might be the most unexcellent message on excellence. That is a precursor. But it's funny how these things happen. While I was trying to prepare, of course, the kids have been home because we're all locked down here. And you're trying to write down meaningful thoughts. And I have one kid being like, how do you spell arachnophobia? And another one being like, what's the square root of 3,000,004? And another one being like, I can't remember my password for my email. So I did the best with what I had. Anyways, I hope you've been enjoying kind of the intentional time that we've taken to not just articulate our values, but to really just unpack them as an investment as a church. And I've just really loved this process and loved watching kind of moving beyond just a value to something that is embedded or is increasing in our culture. So that when we carry these values, the people around us catch it and they catch the culture. And so it's less about teaching, more about experiencing it. And so if we think of values as kind of being beliefs, but culture being more like a behavior. So I'm going to be talking about the culture of excellence, not just the value of excellence, and what that looks like and feels like practically. It's not just a value. Culture is behavior, and value is our belief about something. So I believe in excellence, therefore it changes my behavior. I believe in generosity, therefore it changes what I do with my time and my money, and so on and so on. And values only have as much value as they can become tangible and kind of affect the atmosphere around us. They change us. They don't just stay as kind of like this nice thought that we mentally ascend to. It wouldn't matter, or it would matter very little if you mentally just ascended to the idea of harmony, but we're actually in your behavior very disagreeable and conflict oriented. When I got my first teaching job, it was in a trilingual school in Quebec. And I was hired as an English immersion teacher because I did not know any French. I was homeschooled, so I got exempt all through my high school years, so I knew no French whatsoever, which meant that the kids genuinely had to speak in English. There was no other option. But what worked well in the classroom did not work well in staff meetings. So the staff meetings, we get a French agenda about all the things that we would be talking about, and then the entire meeting would be in French. It would kind of start out a little bit in English here and there, and then it gets super passionate and just everyone would be talking in French. And I'd be kind of trying to decipher on the agenda, like, what exactly are we talking about? Oh, I think it's this. And anyways, there was one meeting where I thought we were talking about this program that we were starting in the church about conflict resolution skills for children. And it just got super heated. People were shouting and standing up and like leaning over the table. And then all of a sudden, the person who was supposed to be leading this conflict resolution program for kids just took a bunch of books, threw them at the photocopier, ripped a poster off the wall, and exited the staff room. And it was just like this really funny moment where, it doesn't really matter if you believe in harmony, if you're not actually in harmony, if it doesn't change your behavior, if it doesn't change the atmosphere. So these things only matter as much as they change us and create meaning by changing our behavior and becoming flesh. So I say that to contextualize what I'm sharing about excellence, because I think sometimes excellence can get a really bad rap as something that's unachievable or something to kind of just mentally ascend to, but not something practical and hands-on. And, as we've been working to define these values, it's been actually a really long time. It's been kind of the result of maybe 24 plus months or something of focus groups and feedback and reworking and celebrating and capturing what these values mean to us as a church and to our culture. And that's what makes them so solid, is that every one of these values outlast any kind of current or past context. What was true about what we believe is still true today. I think it's funny how like any organization's values has like excellence somewhere, some version of excellence in their values. And, if you didn't, it would be kind of like saying, we strive for nothing and we don't really care if we're doing good. We're not going to try. And that's not very inspiring. But anyways, this value for us is very future-proof. It's very time-proof. It would outlast any error. So there's, all of these values and their significance and importance mean the same no matter the year. So let's say even through a pandemic, it might not seem like the best time to talk about excellence. We're all tired and burnt out. Why would you want to talk about putting on more expectations? That sounds kind of cruel. But excellence is actually for exactly a time like this. And I think it can be very life-giving. It's a very life-giving concept to our quality of life, and it can save us from the sweatpants era of the last 2 years, let's say. So I want to start just by defining what excellence is and then what it isn't. And I think many people have gotten hurt in the name of excellence. And I don't think that it was actual excellence that maimed them. I think that maybe it's maybe a bit of a contorted idea or view or perspective of what excellence is. So it's good to define what we mean when we talk about excellence instead of having kind of these working definitions or experiences of what that contorted idea of excellence is floating around in the air, providing the context every time I say the word excellence. So this is what excellence is. This is the excellence that I'm talking about. Excellence is doing the best we can with what we have. Excellence is doing the best you can to a purpose. And it's primarily a spirit or an attitude. We're always, our actual values written as excellence is our spirit. We always bring our best with no half measures, our hearts set on things done well for a purpose. And sometimes when we think of the word excellence, we think of, opulence or extravagance or luxury, like the Super Bowl halftime show or the Taj Mahal or, displays of kind of this extraordinary wealth. That is so excellent. But I don't think that that's necessarily what excellence is. There's lots of times in life where maybe we do not do the best with what we have. And when that has happened in an area consistently for me, it's usually accompanied by a defeating or limiting belief, like, I can't do this excellently without this person or these people, or I can't do this excellently because of this budget, or I don't have that piece of equipment or that opportunity, or, I can't do this excellently because we're at this stage of development. And it really comes down to a vision and a trust problem. It's like having a poverty mentality. I don't have what I need to do what I've been asked to do. And it looks to the kind of exterior resources, not the interior resources of vision and resourcefulness. And it certainly doesn't look at the spiritual resources that I have in my hands and the things that, I can't see, but are very, very present and accessible to us. So God has really worked this very hard through with me. The idea that I can't get where he's calling me if I'm constantly looking around and obsessing with what I don't have. And I love the story of the disciples, right after they it's the feeding of the 5,000. So they've like multiplied all this bread and this fish, and they've fed like thousands and thousands of people, and they get in the boat with Jesus and they're heading somewhere and they're hungry. They didn't bring any bread with them. And it's funny because he's like, oh, let's have something to eat. And they're like, oh, we don't have any bread. Shoot, we don't have any bread. And Jesus is like, why do you reason that you have no bread? Like, you're like literally sitting in the boat with the miracle maker who just multiplied all this bread and all this fish. Why would you reason that you don't have bread? And sometimes we can forget that. We can forget the supernatural miracle working God who is in the boat with us. And we can just look at the natural resources of what we don't have and why we can't be excellent. And we forget the spiritual ones because, they're not in our optics sometimes. There was one time, recently where I was feeling just overwhelmed. I knew the vision that God had called me to. I knew that, in theory, he had empowered me to do it, but I looked around and I didn't have any physical resources to accomplish what he was asking me to the level he was asking me to. And I was driving down the highway, and it was a 2-lane highway, and all of a sudden these massive transport trucks surrounded me. There was like 5 in front of me, 5 behind me, and like 5 next to me. And we were all going at a decent pace. I wasn't slowing down. I wasn't, didn't feel the need to pass anybody, not that I could have. And God just spoke to me about, do you realize the resources that are surrounding you? These supernatural transport trucks of resources. And just as he spoke to me, a Wonder Bread truck went by, which I think is the most wonderful resource of all. Anyways, I think that is a really important thing to acknowledge. There was not that long ago, for those of you who have been with us for a while, you might remember Mom Stop. Mom Stop was an initiative way back downtown with the Overbrook Community Center, and we had met as a group of moms, and we had been really inspired by some of the work that Deborah Lyon in the UK had been doing with a program called Mom Stop, where they just had seen thousands of people saved, and it was like a mom's outreach, and we got super inspired and we're like, let's do that here. So we planned everything out, and for whatever reason, the different people who were going to help with it just suddenly were unable to, for lots of different reasons. They weren't able to commit. And I just kind of looked around and was like, what am I going to do? It's just me and my 4 very tiny children. And we laugh about it now because I somehow reeled in Steve. It's like a mom's newborn playgroup. Steve and Johnny and Sam to help with this mom's outreach at the Overbrook Community Center. And it was just incredible to see the hand of God move where I thought I had no resources. The secretary at the desk at the Overbrook Community Center just started advertising like crazy for us. You know what? You have a kid? You have to go to this amazing playgroup. It's so amazing. And within like a couple of weeks, we were just packed out. And then all the moms from the community that were in there were like, would you like me to bring snack? Would you like me to do this? Would you like me to bring like the craft next week? And it was just everybody working together. God totally supplied every need for Mom Stop. And it was just this really cool testimony about how our resources aren't always what we expect. Excellence is a spirit, and it's a belief that leads to changing our behavior and an intentional embracing of what we have, not looking at what we don't have. And this is the beautiful story that God's writing with our lives. If we were some kind of trust fund kid who had everything you could ever need, you wouldn't ever have to, develop this beautiful trust with the Father who never leaves us hanging. But he does ask us to trust. And when we've looked around and been overwhelmed by a lack of physical resources, as you do when you're church planting, you can get a feeling like you're spread super thin. And it has been from those kinds of limiting beliefs of not enough, or I don't have what I need, so therefore I can't embrace excellence, that, I've really struggled with at different points in my life. And it often comes from comparison or a misunderstanding of what excellence is. Trying to do something to someone else's standard. Maybe you've seen someone on Instagram or a multi-million member church pull off something. And instead of it just inspiring you, it puts pressure. And it's like comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10 with no value of the process of what it takes to get from chapter 1 to chapter 10. You can't just go to chapter 10. As a small church plant, we can't fast forward to, being, I don't know, Joel Osteen's church, or we don't have the budget that a mega million member church has. We have our budget, we have our vision, and it might mean something different for us. We have, I love Hillsong Kids. I love everything that church produces for children. It's just incredible. And there are times where I've looked at their stuff and been like, oh man, we're just not cuddling. We just can't pull that off. Instead of embracing what I do have and doing the best with what I have to a purpose. So it would be nice to be able to pull off a Hillsong Kids level kids meeting, but it probably won't compare to an actual Hillsong Kids meeting. But it isn't what God has asked me to build with my life, which comes out of a relationship with Him. And there's always an enabling and envisioning from Him for that. We can be inspired by these churches who do things really well and super excellently, and they are doing the best with what they have. They have $1 billion budget. I'm not called to do the best with what they have. I'm called to do the best with what I have in the context that God has given me. He didn't call me to the kids ministry of Hillsong. He called me to the kids ministry of All Nations Church. And there was like a time when we were first meeting at the Franco Jeunesse downtown, and there was just the children's work needed some work. We were meeting in a gym, and at one point, it was just kind of like all these kids in this wide open gym. Maybe there was a toddler in the parking lot. No one knew how they got there. Kids were chewing on batteries. It was like someone needed to do something. So I was like, well, all right, it can't get any worse. And so we invested some time in making that excellent. Isaac made these rolly boxes. Everyone remembers the lime green rolly boxes with all the toys and stuff put in there. We invested in toys, barriers, mats, programs, curriculum, and we pulled off this incredible children's ministry. God didn't give me a Hillsong Kids building and facility to pull that off. He gave me broken batteries, but because I was obedient and following what He had, the vision He had given me for it, glory followed. And then it was really amazing. It multiplied, thank goodness. Thank goodness we had put these structures in place before the place exploded with children and babies. But and it's the same with a place like Ashfield. He gave us Ashfield, a bank foreclosure hole in the ground. And He didn't give us a finished, beautiful $1 million horse facility. He gave us a bank foreclosure where all the pipes had burst in the walls. There was no heat and all kinds of massive issues. And but He gave us the ingredients to be excellent. And look at the results. It's glory. It's beauty. To create nothing from, with limited physical and people resources, to create with God is an incredible privilege. Better than any kind of comparison I could try to replace it with. Because that would only ever be a picture of what someone else was called to. It wouldn't be the glory itself. I've heard of this example about how, of the Grand Canyon, and in the particular context that I read about it, it was talking about marriage and how marriage is just a snapshot of the Grand Canyon. It's not the full picture of the Grand Canyon, which is massive. It's too much for one photo to fully contain. And it's like marriage is a snapshot of Christ's relationship with the church, which is the massive Grand Canyon. There's just this vast, beautiful bigness of God that has vision and excellence in it. And I don't want to build my life on someone else's snapshot of that. I want to build it from the actual picture itself. And that comes from a relationship of creating with your Creator, and a trust that withstands any earthly bound challenge that we face. He's doing something new. He's not doing something borrowed or something old, something past. He's building something new. And replicating something else that we weren't called to would, be kind of offensive. We can take inspiration, absolutely, but we're not copycats. We're creators. That's who God made us. And again, I can take inspiration from there, but when it comes to a defeating sense of pressure to replicate or compete, it's no longer helpful. It's not empowering. And the comparison becomes a robber of all the good things, like the process. I would love to inherit $1 million budget, but I wouldn't be who I am today unless I started with nothing but the grace and vision of God. So, excellence is doing the best we can with what we have. Excellence is doing the best you can to a purpose. Excellence is our spirit. We always bring our best, no half measures, our heart set on things done well for a purpose. Do the best with what you have. But that does not mean that we get to get by with the least required either. Neither does it mean that we're on a perfectionist mission. Those are two different ditches. And you see lots of these kind of paradoxical images in scripture. You have, the tabernacle in all its glory with very specific, measurements and jewels and all the things that went into that. And it was beautiful and opulent and luxurious and all those things. But Jesus didn't walk around in, robes bejeweled in excellence, we have our crowns that we're going to lay at Jesus' feet. We're not laying our peasant rags, we're laying our crowns, our very best. And then you have something like the ark, where it had to be excellently built, excellently. And the detail, maybe people didn't understand why at the time it had to be excellent, but obviously it housed a miracle. It had literally housed salvation for Noah and his family. And sometimes I think we can kind of get into a bit of a, that building in excellence is never half measures. And so sometimes I get into like this little, I'm aware of it now, but sometimes in my mind I get into this little thing where I'm like, well, I did the best with what I wanted to give, not the best with what I had, and really it comes down to lordship of, does Christ have my whole life? Does he have all of it? We are called as a church to prepare the way of the Lord, and that can't be done in half measures. Can't be done when we just want to. Well, I gave what I wanted to give. When my kids were little, we used to read this book called Halfway Herbert, and he was like this little kid who always did things halfway. He brushed his hair halfway, he brushed his teeth halfway. So he got all the consequences of it being halfway and none of the good of doing it the right way. And we used to have this little saying with our kids when we were teaching them how to obey in excellence, and it was like, we obey all the way, right away, with a good attitude every day. And so when we look at excellence, it's like it's all in. The church at large, sadly, doesn't really have a great reputation in this area. It does not have a great reputation in valuing or operating in excellence and not doing the best with what we had, maybe. The church at large, I'm not talking about just us specifically. But there can be kind of this subtle attitude of like, well, you get what you get. You're a charity or a church. And I can remember a few years back, somebody had like contacted the church and they were basically on their way to the dump with a bunch of furniture. And then they said, oh, and then we thought of the church. We thought, well, maybe the church could use this. And it was just like this poverty charity mentality of like, the church is one little tiny step from the dump. And this, people can feel like, why are you talking about excellence when there's so much poverty? There can be a lot of resistance to the idea of excellence. And, especially when there's global trauma and tragedies going on, why does excellence matter in the church when we have people that are starving in other countries and things like that? There can be this idea, especially when it comes to, volunteers in the church, where it's like, don't expect too much, just scrape by with what you can, we can't be too hard on our volunteers. They have to go to work tomorrow and, they did the best they could, and we just need to take what we can get, don't expect too much. And I really think that that's opposite to the character of Christ. We give our very best. We are all in. We're not like, well, I'll do it if you need somebody, if you absolutely, kind of thing. Paul Scanlon says, excellence is the Cinderella that gets shoved under the stairs, and the two evil sisters are that'll do and good enough, and they are running the church. And so it becomes the norm. It becomes the norm that runs the house. Religion and excellence also do not go together. Religion believes that excellence is worldly and corporate and professional, and that it's not what the church is about. Religion and legalism will certainly not help us achieve excellence. We're not looking for anything opulent or extravagant. We're not looking for marble microphones, just simple things done well. for a purpose. Small things done well have a really big impact. I read a book recently on just this woman's excellence in hospitality and how it just saved like a whole town, There's small things done well. And I mean, you obviously notice when small things aren't done well, it shows that there's no care, or there's no value in it. And so it's important. The other side of the ditch is perfectionism. And perfectionism is often defined as the need to be or appear to be perfect, or even to believe that it's possible to achieve perfection. The tendency to demand of others or of oneself an extremely high or even flawless level of performance in excess of what is required by the situation. And in excess is associated with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and other mental health problems. Perfectionism is a refusal to allow for growth, a refusal to enjoy the journey and to accept the stage that you are at. It is an unrealistic belief of an outcome that is not possible. It is unreasonable, it is finicky, and it is nitpicky. And it is a flawed belief system, and it's a dangerous one at that. Perfectionism often masquerades as excellence. It is just a shell of what excellence actually is. It is not the substance. And for whatever reason, motherhood is a real breeding ground for this. I'm not sure why, but when I first had Davith, I did okay when I first had Davith, but you're confronted by all the things that you thought motherhood would be, all your own perfectionist, concepts of what this would feel like and look like. And in reality, I was like 80 pounds overweight, struggling to sleep, cried a lot, that was a very natural progression into motherhood that lots of people don't talk about. Lots of people have an amazing time too. But we'd gone to like a Lamaze or prenatal class or something before we had Davith, and then the one of the people that had also had a baby would be like, hey, let's all get together and let's compare babies now that they're all born. And so we went to her house. She was going to host like a little luncheon, and we were just going to talk about babies and stuff. So anyways, we come with all our babies, and this woman's house is like immaculate. And we get there and we're all talking, and someone goes to change one of their baby's diapers, and like, keep in mind, these are like 2-month-olds. And this lady's like, oh, you're still using the old way of diapers. My baby, I have trained to pee in the sink or the toilet. And it was like, what? I didn't even know this was an option. Like, what? And it was just the way that this woman was talking about, us lesser thans whose babies pooped in diapers and hers that pooped in the toilet and in the sink. And it was like this perfectionism that was really unhealthy, of like showing other people up of their flawed excellence, their how they're not cutting it, kind of thing. And I'm sure we've all been hurt at different times with this type of perfectionism in the name of excellence. And really do what you are called to do. Do the best with what you have, and God will multiply it. He will bless it. He will never bless perfectionism, but He is perfect. And that kind of perfectionism is not what we're talking about. We're talking about something way more accessible and practical. You can start today to be excellent at something. You can't start right now to be perfect in something. You can commit excellence today. You can commit to excellence today to any small thing or habit or routine. Today, you can give it the excellent treatment. And that is to do the best with what you have. The best you can with what you have, to a purpose. Even in failing, you can still be excellent. We did the best with what we had, and it's the best that we could have done. There was we all love Ben Roebuck, so I'm going to use this example because I think it's a really proud moment. But even in failing, we can be excellent. There was Kingdom Advance a while ago. I don't remember when it was. I don't even remember what the mistake was, but it was like the worship team started on the wrong key or something. And it was like, with a conference weekend, you're like, yes, we're all going to be excellent. We've been practicing. It's going to be excellent. And I started the song, and it was just, I can't remember. Something was wrong with the song. And Ben just stopped it and was like, let's do it again in the right key. And it was amazing. It was like the perfect way to fail. It was like no pressure. We don't need to stop. We don't need to be a grudgy attitude about it or anything. It was like, yep, there it is. let's just go this way, and it was perfect. Not long after that, it was at a location, and it was a smaller set with a smaller worship team, and somebody made a mistake that was like undiscernible to anyone else, and the person who was leading worship literally stopped playing the keyboard and glared at the person who presumably made the mistake, but then just the meeting just didn't recover. It just didn't recover. And so it was like these two polar opposites of like both were failing. One was excellent, one was less excellent. And I think of Anna Green Gables in moments of like this, because she is someone who had no concept of half measures. She was always all in. And there's different times in the story of Anna Green Gables where she has to like apologize or do where she's failed or something, and she just puts her whole self in. There was just like no half measures. And here's this orphan, little Anne, with no other resources other than herself, her words, and her attitude, and she rocked it. Even when she failed, she was 100% in and excellent. And so I think sometimes perfectionism can often get pointed towards leaders, or the leaders get kind of the brunt of other people's expectations of excellence. And when the leaders sometimes are doing the best with what they have, they're being excellent in their pursuits. So let me give you a really practical example of the spirit of excellence versus the spirit of perfectionism. This is a really practical example, but I think it's a really clear picture of the difference between the two and kind of the nuance of excellence. So that's why I'm using it. It took us a lot of bravery and courage to start meeting back up together after all the COVID lockdowns. There was that long period where for months we weren't able to meet together. And the amount of things we had to overcome to be able to achieve meeting in person on a Sunday morning was astronomical. You had, different people's polar opposite opinions. You had regulations. You had all the barriers that needed to be overcome to be able to actually meet together. And we gave ourselves to excellence in that, to doing the best with what we had. And our volunteers did an amazing job. I have this like distinct image of like Greg with the measuring tape in CP, making sure, we closed off different pews to make sure we were exactly the distance away from each other we needed to be safe. And we had to be so thoughtful about how to execute this to keep everyone safe, but also everyone together. Which, let me tell you, was extremely challenging given the popular opinions of this current era. Anyways, we are so grateful to the volunteers who put so much personal investment to making this happen. They were solution-oriented people, and they were so excellent. It wasn't just like nope, that's going to be too hard. The government has like ridiculous amounts of, things we have to do, and we just don't have the resources. We just can't, They asked God and found a way for the church to happen. The meeting of the saints. It was really important that we met at that time. People were in isolation. It was not good for them, and we needed to meet together. And they found solutions, and I really believe that Jesus is just so grateful, to the people that made that happen. But because we are all different personalities, when it comes to the rules and regulations, this is where personality really starts to manifest with, the that'll do, it doesn't really matter, we don't really need to use masks, and, does COVID really exist, or whatever, let's just do the bare minimum, why go through all this hassle? And we end up putting the most vulnerable in jeopardy with the that'll do, or, it really doesn't matter mentality. But then the flip side is that it becomes about the rules and regulations, and we lose sight of the people and the humanity. We end up crushing people. So the first Sunday back, it was not perfect, but it was excellent. It was the best with what we had. And there was a particular situation in CP where we had been conversing with a man online who had never come to the church before, who had reached out to us in desperate need of help. His wife was dying. He didn't have any support systems. He didn't have any family. He didn't have any friends. And the night before his wife died, she passed. And he had come to our very first meeting back together. And as soon as I saw him, I knew it was him. And he was on the second row. And I just turned to him and said, "Oh, how are you doing?" And he just broke down sobbing, just full body sobbing. And I hugged him. I went and put my arm around him and I prayed with him. I told him it was going to be okay. I told him it was going to be all right. We were with him in it. And This is things done well for a purpose. Why do we meet together if not to see people touched by Christ? And there was some feedback about that moment. That, as a leader, should I be publicly disrespecting social distancing, especially on our first week back? And there were some people who just didn't return, who were like, I just don't feel comfortable with people not respecting social distancing. And it just, for different people, it didn't feel safe for them. And then there was others who quietly came to us with those concerns and said, listen, we've worked so hard to be able to make it so that we can meet together. And the optics of that could, really make it hard for us to meet in the future. And there's all these people who really do need to meet together as people of God. It's super important for them. And it could have put everything that we have just worked for in jeopardy. And they were absolutely right. They were excellent in it. But was I wrong? I would have had to be a pretty callous person not to hug him. I would be a pretty, that you'd have to be pretty harsh to be like, "Ooh, sorry, we got to stay 2 feet away." I chose to meet him with compassion and not the rules. I chose to respond out of humanity and not a legalism. And I'm not even a huggy person. I'm not throwing hugs everywhere. I'm like the least huggy person. And so, anyways, which one was excellent? Was I excellent, or were the people who were wanting to protect the meeting and our ability to meet excellent? And I want to say both. Both was doing the best with what we had for a purpose. And so it's so tricky, but I so appreciate the people who quietly voiced their concerns because it was excellent. They did an outstanding job and they protected the body so that we were able to continue to meet to this day. And then there were different people who, maybe made a judgment instead of asking a question, and then they haven't been back. That was perfectionism. Using excellence against people is where I think excellence can get a rep, being a Karen, walking around Karening people, like a hall monitor. We're not here to police people who have not adopted excellence in their own lives, kind of correcting, perfectioning everyone else's excellence. It's doing the best with what you have. We're not here to police other people's excellence or efforts, as much as we are here to first audit our own and our own approach to love in Christ and his body and celebrate when we see excellence in others. Perfectionism breeds jealousy and comparison. It's not what excellence is, and it's dangerous. And can excellence develop into perfectionism if we're not careful? Absolutely. And that's a religious spirit, perfectionism. Excellence gives. Perfectionism takes or robs. Excellence connects. Perfectionism disconnects. Excellence is growth-oriented. Perfectionism is control-oriented. So when I see an opportunity to grow through mistakes or control and perfectionism-oriented, excellence complements, perfectionism criticizes. Excellence satisfies, perfectionism is never good enough. Excellence is the glory, perfectionism is a picture. Excellence is revelation, perfectionism is a comparison. Excellence delights, perfectionism demands. Excellence is possible, perfectionism is impossible. Excellence is inspired by God, perfection is inspired by religion. Excellence is it has dynamic standards, perfectionism is static and rule-bound. It is the culture of excellence, the delight, the revelation, the inspiration that we are trying to create and not just value it. When adopting this value in your own life, you become aware of just how many things maybe you're not doing well. You're not doing to the best that you had with your, different resources. Like, let's say New Year's resolutions. Well, we start out strong and then we're like, hey. But excellence is not just, a low bar, just above average either. If we can just even do one excellent thing today or every day and approach it with excellence, it's life-changing. I'm going to do this thing better than I've ever done it before. It's not easy and it's not common. But everybody doing the best with what you have, start with one thing and do that thing well. You become more excellent at being excellent in the spirit of excellence. And as we grow and as we spread out as a church and as the culture becomes more complex and there's more layers and dynamics and we're more diverse and the combination of people and personalities and gifts are involved, everything gets more complex as we grow. And that's true of any family. You have a baby and you already have 2 kids. It's like 2 to the exponent of 1. It's not like 2 plus 1. There's just so many different dynamics. that get multiplied, and these values serve as a cultural engineer. And cultural engineers are really important. It's not just as simple as putting a system in. It's a revelation that becomes flesh. Excellence is having to do something by our own cultural standard. Whether it's worship or preaching or kids work or hospitality, excellence always submits to the fruit of the Spirit. Hypothetically speaking, if I want to be excellent in timekeeping, and let's say we need to leave for church, and there is just one kid can't find his socks and this person can't do that, and I lose it, and I'm not patient, and I'm not kind, loving, generous. I'm not any of the fruits. I'm not self-controlled, but we get to church on time. Is that excellent? Nope, it's not. So there are other people who do what you do, and maybe they do it better. But it's about the experience and the journey of what you are called to. Why does this matter? Well, it's a quality of life issue. It's a lifestyle benefit to do the best with what you have across your life. It can only benefit you. To become outstanding in what we do, to have more influence than we have now, to have a larger voice, to gather more people, to impact more than we ever have before. Anything else that you might be aspiring to, it's going to require excellence. You cannot fulfill that dream you have to make this small thing that you're really good at big. You can't achieve it without excellence. We need excellence to steward the words that God has spoken over us. That is why it matters so much. The vision for our church to reach significance, to grow, to reach thousands of people, takes excellence, doing things well. It's a non-negotiable. There's that saying, it's hard to change the world if you can't find your keys. I want to change the world. Well, why don't you start by arriving on time? Why don't you start by being more reliable or being a team player? Why don't you start with not being so disagreeable or negative and being encouraging instead? Those things matter when taking on the world. That's why it matters. And whether you are a kid or an adult or a mom or a dad or stay-at-home anything, or you're unemployed or a head CEO, it matters to be excellent. We need what you have. We need you to aspire to do something amazing and excellently, because it's foundational and it's a part of who God's made you. We're always working on growing and lifting our game as a church, always. But it's doing the best with what we have for a purpose, not for some non-existent fantasy. So those two ditches of that'll do and perfectionism both come from the flesh. And I found myself in both of those ditches, more in one ditch than the other. And definitely in my marriage with Steve, we each fall into maybe two opposite ditches there. And it has been a really great experience to get to encourage each other more to the middle of those things. But anyways, the purpose, why we're excellent, is to the glory of God. We sing about the glory of God all the time in the songs we sing. We sing about laying our crowns at Jesus' feet. A sacrifice of excellence is something that delights God, doing our best with what we have. As a farmer, when I look back at the Old Testament stories of the sacrifices people gave, it wasn't like some three-legged, one-eyed, diseased lamb that was offered. It was the very, very best. So instead of thinking, what will cost me the least, it is like, what is actually going to... Excellence will cost you something, always. It takes sacrifice and discipline and intentionality. David says, how can I offer up to God that which cost me nothing? And I wish I could talk a little bit more about how discipline factors into excellence, but I'm out of time. So, can God use spontaneous afterthoughts? Sure. But which do you think pleases him more? The really spontaneous moments where we arrive late and we, maybe didn't offer our very best. Can God use those moments? Absolutely. But the well-prepared intentions towards excellence, sacrifice in his name, which one do you think he prefers? It delights him, excellence. It's excellence for a purpose. And here is the ultimate purpose, and I'm going to close on this. Excellence isn't mission-driven. It's not because we want to reach the world. It's because of who God is. Excellence can't be mission-focused. It's revelation-focused. We are excellent because we've seen that's who God is. When God created, he did his absolute best. When he made mankind, he formed his absolute best with his hands, and he breathed his own life into us with his breath. And when man fell, he gave his absolute best, his son. There was no holding back. There was no half measures. There was no that'll do. But he gave us excellence in Christ. Our redemption is excellent. God's plan for the earth is excellent. His plan to use the church to win the world, which is why the church is excellent. It is who God is, and because it is who God is, it is who we are. And it is a privilege and an honor to be a part of a church that he's building because his bride is excellent, without spot and without wrinkle. We are excellent. We are the excellent, beautiful bride of Christ, winning the world in excellence to a God who is excellent in every way. We'll see you next week.